Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by MacPaw, the maker of CleanMyMac X. Visit macpaw.com/podcast to download your copy and use the code MacVoices to save 5%. MacVoices is supported by LinkedIn Jobs. Find the right person for your business today with LinkedIn Jobs. Pay what you want and get $50 off your first job post at linkedin.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. This is the third and final installment in our discussion of WordPress with Mike Potter and why WordPress is such a great option for your website. Folks, I feel really strongly about this, and it's one reason we did a three-part discussion here. There's a lot of information and a lot of considerations you need to go through as you decide on what to build your website on. And coming out of lockdown, still maybe in lockdown, depending on where you are, your website is more important than ever. We talked about that a little bit in the first installment, but I want to reiterate it again. If you're thinking about building a website, if you're looking maybe to refresh your website, or this is going to be your very first website, by all means, check this series out. It'll give you a lot of good information. So we'll get back to Mike.
I keep giving you these long-winded answers to what should be simple questions, don't I?
Well, no, but I mean, I said we were going to get under the hood and a little geeky here, and that's good because this part of the conversation is for those people that want to understand a little bit. Again, because you can just hire somebody and say, "Hey, I want a website," and so they go and build a website.
And that's a very valid way to do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Plugins. You kind of wove a couple references to plugins into the last answer, but same thing with plugins. Because I have to be careful with those because they are the things that start to add functionality to my site.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, what do you watch out?
Yeah.
What do you watch?
The themes I cautioned against are the themes that weave that third-party functionality and that maybe you don't realize they're weaving into it, and plugins can sometimes do the same thing. Again, I look for plugins with a good reputation. I look for plugins with a long history of development. I look for plugins that are being put out by, in some cases I do use plugins by individuals because I know of the individual and I know that they have a history of staying on top of these things. But often I look for plugins that are being put out by companies with a long history, or have a good reputation of staying on top of the development of their plugin. So that's what I look for. When you go to the WordPress plugin repository, there is a support section, and it can often be telling to go into that support section and look for questions, look for problems that people are running into, and see what kind of responses they're getting from the developer. If you're seeing 0 to no response, if you're seeing that the developer, which they do show you how quickly they get to answering questions, if you're seeing little to no response, or you're seeing outdated responses, or you're just seeing a lack of interest in this product that they've produced, steer clear. Look at how, one of the first things I look at is when was the last time an update was released for this plugin. It's all right there on their website. They show you when it was last updated. They show you the version of it. They have the support section of it. There are links to the developer's website. If you click on the link to go to their website and it goes to nowhere, it's the road to nowhere, or it goes to something that doesn't even mention the plugin, both of which have happened to me. You end up at a site that doesn't exist, or you end up at a site where there's absolutely, and I don't understand this, absolutely zero mention of this plugin at all. That's a red flag. So I steer clear of those. So this is my process of vetting a plugin. Sometimes I'll be asked by a client, "Hey, can you install this for me? I love the functionality that it offers." The very first thing I'll do is I'll go check it out. I'll go to WordPress.org. I'll find that plugin. I'll I'll look at who's developing it. If it's a team, if it's an individual, and when it was last updated, and all those kind of things. The other thing, now this gets a little weird because you wouldn't imagine that this would happen, but it does happen, is sometimes there are well-supported, well-developed plugins, and they get bought out. And the company that buys them out has a different agenda than the original developer had. Very often, those kind of things will come to light in the support forums. So you want to look for that kind of stuff. Has the plugin recently been sold? Is there a new developer? Has the developer changed recently on it? That's often a red flag. Very often, that's not the case. A developer does not change on plugins unless there's a very good reason for that change. So you want to look at those kind of things, and it sounds complicated, but it's a pretty simple vetting process, or maybe it's become simple to me. Just a few things to look at: frequency of updates, responsiveness, reputation, and reviews. Reviews are, I almost completely forgot about reviews, but you do want to look at reviews. It can very often be like reviews on Amazon. Discard the top 10%, discard the bottom 10%, look at the ones in the middle. It's kind of the same thing anytime you see reviews, is to do that, to discard some of the ones on either end and look at what's in the core and see, does this actually do what it claims to do, and are people having a good experience with it? And look, it's a community. Everything's open source. You're gonna hear if someone didn't have a good experience with it. So that's kind of the process I go through. And then the last thing I do is I will actually install it on a test website I have, not on a production site. I'll bring it onto the site that I use for nothing but experimentation. I'll install it, I'll test it, I'll make sure it does what I need it to do, and I'll run it through security scanners as well. I'll run it through the WordFence security scanner, or I'll run it through Security, and I'll see if they find anything just off the surface unusual. Is there anything about the code that stands out to their scanner that's designed to look for hidden and obfuscated code? Is there anything like that we need to look out for? And they'll often do reputation checks too. WordFence in particular will do a reputation check, or not maybe reputation check is not the right word, but it'll check to see if a plugin hasn't been developed in a certain amount of time and caution you and say, this hasn't been updated for a year, 2 years, what have you. Maybe you want to look for something different. And then once I've gone through all that, I'll give it a run on a production site, but I'll still be wary of it. Maybe overly so. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I'll still be a little wary of it until it's earned my trust and I know that it's something that I can rely upon.
So the answers to the last two questions, I think, have pretty much made a case for why you shouldn't be doing this yourself, why you should be hiring a developer. Because what you're talking about is a certain amount of research that, if you're not already familiar with the subject, is going to take a long time to do. And you also, you have an idea for just like you and I have a good idea, and most of the listeners and viewers have a good idea for the reputable, the unquestionable Mac vendors and
Right.
Apple vendors out there, as opposed to some absolutely totally legitimate newcomers or smaller developers, but then you got the bad guys mixed in there. And so for certain things, like, again, on the Apple side, for passwords and for security, virus scanning, malware scanning, I want to go with someone that has been around for a while, that has a good reputation, and we all kind of know who those are just by being part of the community. But if I'm stepping into
go-to app developers, yes.
Yes. And so now if I'm stepping into the WordPress community for the first time, I really don't have a good feeling for that. And unless I'm willing to put in the time, or I have a desire to learn this stuff, I think I need a developer.
Yeah, and I mean, at least someone you can consult with. And I've had that experience with clients as well, where they want to do it themselves, but they have some of these questions, and so we'll sit down for an hour and we'll talk about what they want to do. I'll tell them about some of the plugins and themes I've had good luck with. Certainly, they don't have to go with any of those, but I'll share my knowledge to the extent that I can share it with them. I'm very open with everyone in terms of what I use and how I use it and why I use it, hosts I prefer and things like that. I'm very open with them about it, and we'll have that discussion. And very often they'll go off, they'll try it, they'll get to a certain point. Very often they'll be successful, they'll launch it, and that's important to emphasize that. Yes, there's a famous 5-minute install. If you're working with a hosting company that's familiar with WordPress, they're going to install it for you. But WordPress is at its core. I don't in any way want this to sound like it's some complicated system. It's easy to manage. It's easy to create. It's easy to publish, and it's easy to run, even from a small business perspective. But you do have to put the time into it. If you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to do the updates, the non-automatic updates, I should say, if you're not willing to update the plugins, update the themes when they're necessary, if you're not willing to test things out when an update comes out, there is a certain sense of, as easy as it is, there is a certain sense of geekiness to it, I guess. Still, I mean, how can you not have something that's technical be just a little bit geeky still? There's still a little bit of that, and that's probably why I love working with it so much. It's kind of like a digital Lego set, if you will. Sometimes the pieces don't fit together properly, and so you have to find the piece that does fit into that corner of the building you're trying to construct. And it's the same thing with a website. Sometimes the pieces just don't fit together quite the way you expected them to. Even for me, I'll try something that I'm pretty sure is going to work, and then it turns out it doesn't work the way I wanted it to. And then it's time to find another solution. That process of trial and error can be frustrating, admittedly. But at its core, WordPress is easy to install. It's easy to manage. It's easy to use, but when you do want to take it to the next level, it's probably a good idea to sit down with someone who has some familiarity with it and just have a conversation. And even if you don't want to hand the whole project over to them, it's a good idea to have that conversation, I think. Most small businesses don't want to do all this. They just don't want to. They have a business to run, whether it's a flower shop or whether it's a farmer's market or whether it's a nonprofit. Their concern on a day-to-day basis is to make sure that business runs. They don't want to run a website. And that's where someone like me or some of our other friends that you and I both know who do this, that's where we come in. And we all have different skill sets too. We all have different skill sets, which is why I work closely with a couple of my friends who actually do what I do, but we work very well together and will very often hand projects off to each other. I just got an email this morning from a friend in California who said, yeah, I need to have this done for my client's website and I don't have time to do this. Can you do it for me? So it's not only a community of knowledge, but a community of sharing, and I'll get paid for that referral. He'll pay me for that referral, but he's willing to do it because he knows that maybe I have the time, or I'm willing to pay him because I know he has the time to do this thing or that expertise. Maybe he or she actually. There's several she's I work with as well, who have that expertise that I don't have, and I'm more than willing to pass that part of the project off to them.
Mike, one of the reasons I'm spending so much time on this here, because I do think it is important. And again, I feel like the COVID-19 thing may have changed everybody's attitude. I hope it has, because I think it should, that your website is not just a throwaway. Because I have some friends
Right.
in different businesses, and their website is literally a throwaway. And if you talk to them about spending any money on it with a developer or any enhancements, it's like, oh my God, no, it's just a website, and
Just a website.
yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
website. And
Right.
they would not hesitate to spend money on a Yellow Pages ad, God help us, but they don't want to spend any money on their website. And it's like,
Which are expensive. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yellow Page ads are expensive.
they
Yeah.
are expensive, but they don't perceive their web presence as important. And as we go on here, it's becoming more and more important. And the reason I think you want to work with a developer like Mike or like someone else, you need to sit down, find out if your personalities fit, but make sure
Yeah.
that. Now, I was about to slander another profession. I won't go there. But the developer has to be willing to work with you to build the kind of website that you want, and listen to what your needs and wants are. And earlier in the conversation, we said about being able to update the website. If they want you to send the information to them to update the website, unless that's what you want, sorry, you're kind of being taken, because they're going to charge you for that. Now, if you want to do that, I mean, if you're a restaurant, every Saturday, every week, you have, specials for the week, and you are comfortable emailing them off to the developer and having them post it, and you're willing to pay for it, that's fine. But you really don't need to do that. And
Right.
you can build a website that can be easily accessed. You don't have to go through any of what Mike and I have been talking about. And so there's so many aspects to this, but I think it is so important right now to take a good hard look at these issues, because this is your business. This may be your livelihood that you're talking about. This edition of MacVoices is supported by LinkedIn Jobs. I don't need to tell you that the world has changed. Your business, your recreation, the way you get together with friends or don't get together with friends is all in flux, and it's going to be for some time. That's why you need to start rethinking pretty much everything. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. There are over 675 million LinkedIn members, representing an amazing pool of talent for just about any industry you can think of, including your industry. And they are just waiting for you to find them and make them part of your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you put your job posting in front of the best candidates, the right candidates, by screening them for all the skills and requirements you choose. By doing so, it saves you time and money when it comes to making your next great hire. And LinkedIn Jobs is doing more during these challenging times. To post a healthcare or essential services job for free, or if you're in another industry and have hiring needs, visit linkedin.com/MacVoices. LinkedIn.com/MacVoices. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks to LinkedIn Jobs for their support of MacVoices and their support of the healthcare and essential services industries. MacPaw, the makers of CleanMyMac X, are supporting this edition of MacVoices. We finally have details on the next version of macOS. Big Sur is coming our way, your way, and you're going to want to take advantage of all it has to offer. Whether you want to live dangerously and run the developer beta, live a little less dangerously and run the public beta when it comes out, or wait until Big Sur goes mainstream, it helps to have your Mac as clean as possible. It helps to have all the drive space possible available. MacPaw can help with that with their CleanMyMac X utility. Not only does CleanMyMac X get rid of outdated junk files with their System Junk feature, it also lets you see what's taking up space on your hard drive with its Space Lens feature. That way you can manage what you do and don't need. And then CleanMyMac X will help you stay updated on all the essential details of your system. And maybe best of all, nothing gets deleted or modified in your system unless you know about it first and specifically approve. So you're always in control. It's good to be in control. Visit macpaw.com/podcast to download CleanMyMac X today and use the coupon code MacVoices to receive 5% off. Upon visiting macpaw.com/podcast, Click the Buy Now button, then scroll to the bottom of your screen to enter the code before completing your purchase. CleanMyMac X is also now available in the Apple App Store. That's macpaw.com/podcast, macpaw.com/podcast, and the coupon code MacVoices to save 5% on CleanMyMac X. Do it now and get ready for Big Sur. Thanks to MacPaw and CleanMyMac X for their support of MacVoices.
There was, before all this struck, a number of, look, my business is in a relatively small community of 25,000. There's several communities around approximately that same size in the area, 25 to 40,000, all within the same county here, all within probably about 12 miles of each other. And it's not uncommon for a small business to say, well, I have a Facebook page. I don't need any more than that. I have a Yelp review page. I don't need any more than that. I have Twitter. I don't need any more than that.
Uh-huh.
But in every single one of these cases, you don't own that content. In most of those cases, you don't have the right to close a deal, whatever that deal is, with your customers or clients. It's a place to communicate with them. Certainly, it's a valuable place to communicate with them, and that's great. But it shouldn't. This sounds very self-serving, but it shouldn't be the center of your online solar system, if you will. The sun of your solar system should be your website. These other services are just planets revolving around it. And when you want to close a sale, when you want to sell a product, when you want to give more information or collect information from someone that you can't otherwise collect on a platform like Facebook or what have you, you need a website. And it's great to have, I don't like this term, but it's great to have brochureware. But it's better to have a place where you can interact. And social networks are good for that. A website is great for that because you can always take that interaction to the next level on a website, and you can't necessarily take it to the next level on Facebook or Twitter or Yelp. So, and businesses, and you mentioned restaurants, and this was very, very true. Restaurants were discovering, and other small businesses were discovering, when their doors were forced shut, that they didn't have the tools they needed to interact properly with their customers. In some cases, one client in particular, they had an online catalog, but it wasn't an online store, but they were prepared to turn it into an online store. So we were able to take their online catalog and switch on the purchasing mechanism of it because we had the WooCommerce component in place. We were able to switch it on and start allowing them to sell product within a day. Others who didn't even have that had to start from scratch. And in some cases, they turned to the web builders. In some cases, they turned to WordPress. In some cases, they turned to other platforms. But a lot of people were caught by surprise. We were all caught by surprise by this, but a lot of people were caught by surprise and the realization that they didn't necessarily have the online tools that they, to your point, that they needed, not wanted, but needed. And now they do.
And there's one last point I want to make before we wrap up, and I want you to comment on it. So now we're talking about the functionality, all right, and you've got it. But there's also the experience. And this is something else I learned during COVID-19, that those websites that they bolted stuff together, yeah, if I really wanted a cheesesteak from that place, I could order it. But I got to tell you, I really wanted a cheesesteak from that place because it was a pain in the butt to order, and it was a royal pain to go through, as opposed to, and we'll go with the big dog, okay, as opposed to Amazon. Click, boom, it's headed to me. Now I don't expect that for this, but there are plenty of food delivery places or food ordering places, I prefer to pick up myself, that here it is, here's what you do. I get a number, I pull up and they put it in my car. And I've paid online,
Right.
and so I literally have to say, "Hi, I'm number 365," and I roll down my back window and they put my dinner in the back of the car. As opposed to, "Hi, I'm Chuck Joyner. Yeah, I ordered this, but I got the one without onions and I got the one with extra sauce." And it just, so don't overlook that part of it. And again, that's where you want a developer like Mike or like someone in your community, or not in your community, but someone that is really good at this and can give your customers the experience, because that translates into more sales. Period. Mike, agree?
Well, I'm a big proponent of face to face. You mentioned, working with someone who's in your community or not necessarily in your community. You can absolutely work with someone who's not in your community, but I think being able to meet with someone who's in your community and at least has a passing knowledge, if not a full knowledge of who your customer base might be, is super important. Sometimes the best intentions can go awry, right? And you'll put something together either for yourself or for a client, and you expect it to work a certain way. And when real life hits and customers start placing orders, you realize it's not quite working the way that you want it to. So that's where having someone who's local, or just responsive, having someone who's responsive, whether they're local or not, is important when you have a new site out there and you're let's be honest, effectively beta testing it on your customers, because it's your customer base who is going to tell you how they want that site to work. And for good or bad, Amazon ruined things for a lot of people. And Amazon and Google both ruin things for a lot of people. Google with the millisecond response times, and Amazon with the stupid click and it's in your house within 5 minutes thing. And it's all free, by the way, which most small businesses can't afford to ship for free. Shipping is expensive. Shipping is really expensive. When you ship something that weighs 20 pounds halfway across the country and you find out that that's going to run you $35 and you charge your customers $10.99 for shipping, that's a hard lesson to learn. So there's a lot of trial and error that can sometimes go into a site when you first launch it. But you when you're working with someone who understands your community, you can try to mitigate that as best as possible. And sometimes they'll have suggestions on how best to handle that sort of thing. And maybe in the shipping example, it's a table rate shipping instead of relying upon pulling cost directly from FedEx or UPS or USPS. Maybe it's a table rate, and sometimes you'll come out ahead and sometimes you come out behind. But in the end, ultimately, you hope to break even, that kind of thing. But Amazon and Google have ruined things for a lot of small businesses and their websites, because sometimes the expectations are skewed by those services, and that can be, sometimes there's nothing you can do about that, and it's a learning experience for your customers as well.
Mike, I've got to tell you this, we spent a lot of time on this, and I feel like it was well worth it. If someone is interested in this or has this need, and again, I just feel like right now it is so much more important than it's ever been before. So thank you for taking all the time you have and sharing your wisdom. And I definitely want to have you plug your business as well, because if at the very least they can maybe contact you if someone needs to get started, and you can give them some pointers. If they want to retain you, then great. But what's the best way to get in touch with you with that hat on?
With this hat on? The
No,
best
not
way to
that
get in
hat,
touch
but
with me
yeah.
with this hat on, I'm going to plug this hat.
Okay.
And the reason I'm going to plug this hat is because, if people have seen me on your show before, they've probably seen me on MacVoices because of MacStock. MacStock is the annual conference that started in 2015 for Apple users, and we have a great time. It's a community-focused conference, and it's for people of all experience levels. And I'm, look, this pandemic is one of the most painful decisions I had to make, and we talked about this on your show, was postponing MacStock this year because it's so much fun. It's just such a fun event. As crazy as it can make me sometimes, it's just such a fun event that I really wanted to do something this year, and it's getting very, very close. And I'm shirking my MacStockian duties, but I really want to have I was an English major. I can make up words.
Okay.
And MacStockian, yeah, that's a word. So I really want to put on a virtual conference or a virtual event. Let's put it that way, a virtual event. What would have been MacStock weekend this year, and that's exactly what I'm hoping to do. July 25th and 26th. It's going to be free for anyone who wants to come along. And if you want to find out more about that, I'm going to keep this plug short. If you want to find out more about it, please go to MacStockConferenceandExpo.com and sign up for the newsletter or follow me on Twitter, because as we get closer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of artificially limit things by releasing free tickets to this. So you're going to have to sign up for it, but that's just to give me an idea of how many people are trying to watch these live streams and things like that. But I'm hoping to have at least 10 of the folks who would have presented at MacStock this year giving short presentations, and it's a small way to kind of keep that community together until we can see each other all in person next year. And that's the goal, of course, is to see each other in person next summer. So that's my short plug for that. Now, for what I do on a day-to-day basis, my company is called Escape Technologies Group. I'm M. Potter at Escape Technologies Group. As much as we've been talking about websites, yes, my website is a WordPress website, but please understand that this cobbler's kids have no shoes. I spend so much time working on my clients' websites that I've all but ignored my website recently. And I was really hoping to use the downtime during the pandemic, where I was forced to not go to the office to work on my website. And I ended up working on more client websites because they realized they didn't have a website and needed a website. So it's one of those cyclical things that just keeps happening to me. So while there is a website there, and it's okay, it's brochureware. It's brochureware. And I want to make it better. I want to focus better on what I do, and where I've pivoted to in the 10 years of my business to being a WordPress agency, and that's the bulk of what I do now. That and MacStock is what I do through Escape Technologies Group. And so one of these days I'll refocus that. But if anyone goes there, please, you can reach out to me, and I'd happily have, if you're not in my area, happily have a Skype or Zoom conversation with you about your plans and where you would like to take your business online. But yeah, Escape Technologies Group. I'm M. Potter at Escape Technologies Group, and that's where you can find me. But MacStockConferenceandExpo.com is MacStock, and at MacStock Expo is my Twitter handle. So
perfect. Mike, thanks again. Great job. A lot of great explanations. So much good information for folks out there that need it, and or that maybe didn't need it and now they think they will. So,
well, my pleasure. It was fun, and what I really wanted to try to do is keep from getting geeky and just kind of talk about the core nuts and bolts of why you might want to have a WordPress site. And so it's been a fun conversation. Like I said, I don't normally talk about this. I talk about MacStock. So it was fun to kind of sit back and think about it and have a conversation with it when I don't normally do that.
Good. Well, we will definitely have you back again once virtual MacStock gets a little bit closer, so we can talk about some of the details of that. But this was great. Thank you. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. I hope you got a lot out of this because I again, for the 100th time, I feel like this is really important at this particular point in time, and I want to help guide you a little bit into where you should be when it comes to your online presence. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.